Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, and like you, extremely thrilled and excited and greatly honored that we have with us President Macky Sall of Senegal. The President is one of Africa's most dynamic leaders, a paragon of democracy and of forward vision on development. From the Earth Institute, we take special pleasure that he's a geologist and an earth scientist who began in senior positions in government as Minister of Mines, but he has been a leader in Senegalese politics for a long time with a distinguished career and a very, very exciting prospect of his presidency. He's been Prime Minister in the previous decade, at which point we also worked closely together on many issues of the Millennium Development Goals. He's been President of the National Assembly and now winning office last year is President of a very dynamic and exciting country. We're also honored to have many Senegalese leaders together in the delegation, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Health. If I may say a word about the Minister of Health, because she's absolutely remarkable. Minister Awa Kolsek is one of the world's leaders in public health. She was Executive Secretary for many years before becoming Minister of Health of rollback malaria. And for those of you who are following, you know that Africa is achieving historic gains against malaria. For the first time in history, malaria is coming down very, very sharply and very rapidly, and we should thank Dr. Awa Kolsek for that. And finally, I have to say, though he's not with us today, that the Senegalese cabinet includes the best voice of any member of a cabinet in the whole world, Minister of Culture and Tourism, Youssou N'Dour, our favorite singer. We were with Youssou a couple of days ago at the Broadband Commission. He's a great representative of this country, and we're so thrilled. Let me finally say that the Earth Institute and the Institute for African Studies, and I'm honored to be joined by the director of the Institute for African Studies, Dr. Mamadou Diouf, are extremely proud to be working with Senegal on many different projects and on many different fronts, education, research, and programs on the ground. We love our Millennium Village work in Potou, Senegal, and we love the fact that all of our work for West and Central Africa is headquartered in Dakar, which is a most wonderful city and a most wonderful place for the headquarters of all of our work. And Mamadou, are you going to speak now or no? Okay. So without further ado, Mamadou will be back in mid-act to take questions and also to say a few words. But without further ado, let us all together welcome President Macky Sall.
Thank you very much, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, for your very kind words. And I know how you are committed about African development and about the Millennium Villages project you are leading. Thank you again. Thank you for my fellow citizens teaching on this prestigious university. I'm talking about Professor Mamadou Diouf and Professor Suleiman Bashir Diagne, Professor Diagne and Mrs. C. They all are teachers And a few months ago, I appointed Professor Suleiman Bashir Diagne as chair of the High Commission, the National High Commission in charge of how to promote higher education in Senegal for the for the future. And he did a very, very good job, very patriotically. I have to salute him here. Distinguished Columbia University members and staff, dear students, President Lee Bollinger, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank you for attending this session of the World Leaders Forum. It is a great pleasure to be with you, and I thank President Bollinger for his kind invitation. Allow me also to recognize, I already did it, my fellow citizen, Professor Suleiman Bashir, Professor Mamadou Diouf and Mariam Sy, who are teaching at Columbia University, and student Ulay Ndoye, where she is. Ulay. Okay. Thank you. Mr. President, now I will continue my message in French because I'm afraid you will not understand my English, which is a Francophone English, unless if you want to give me hard work. La première leçon, mesdames et messieurs, que je...
The first lesson I have learned from my trip here is the amazing perseverance of your university in the pursuit and effort of excellence. Since 1754, when Samuel Johnson delivered courses to the first 8 students of King's College in Lower Broadway, Columbia University has built a label that attracts respect and admiration. I would like to pay tribute to some of your illustrious alumni, namely Alexander Hamilton, Gouverneur Morris, and Robert Livingston, all of them who have contributed decisively to the birth of the United States of America. I speak to you today coming from a country with a democratic tradition where voting, although it was limited to specific category of inhabitants, started in 1848 during a real colonial era. Senegal is also a land of diversity, where its population comprises 95% Muslims and their Christian compatriots and other practicing traditional religion, living in perfect harmony. We believe in a world of peaceful coexistence in justice, equity, and solidarity, with universal values of democracy, freedom, respect of human rights, and the diversity of civilizations. Throughout the ages, these values have guaranteed man's security and human dignity. They form the basis for peaceful coexistence within and between human communities. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenge of our time is to protect these values in a world marked by the dialectic of contradictions. Never before has humanity accumulated so much wealth. However, never yet the world has ever had as many poor as it does now, where close to 1 billion people do not have access to proper food, nor education, nor health care, and even less to electricity. On the one hand, the digital system disseminates knowledge, reduces distances amongst networks, and creates amongst people an unprecedented impression of closeness. On the other hand, ignorance, cultural contempt, and extremism of all kinds divides entire communities and fan the flames of distrust and antagonism. There was a mention of clash of civilizations according to the Samuel Huntington's formula of the end of history and the last man, which, according to Francis Fukuyama, heralds the absolute and final victory of an ideal of life and of one side over others. This perspective from Francis Fukuyama takes us back to the Thomas Hobbes conflictual logic. Man is thought to be a wolf to a man, and the weakest will be at the mercy of the strongest up to the last man. Where does that leave our common humanity then? In Senegal, we believe that wisdom tells us that man is a remedy for man in Wolof language. Nit nit ay garabam. Thus, the spirit of solidarity and fraternity constitutes the basis for human relations. The late Léopold Sédar Senghor, the first president of independent Senegal, a world-renowned poet and intellectual, translated this humanist vision by the concept of civilization of the universal. He liked to add the rendezvous between who has and will have. For them to develop, he said, civilization will have to respect each other, benefit from their differences in order to converge towards the universal. Taking into account the latent and open conflicts around the world, dialogue is not an option, but a necessity if we want to ban the specter of war and violence in all its forms. To that end, we must, ladies and gentlemen, admit that all civilizations, all cultures are of equal dignity, and that our common destiny is consistent with a renewed multilateral system that is more representative of our times. It is for this reason, in the image of New York, a cosmopolitan city with linguistic, intellectual, and cultural differences, it is the reason why our countries like ours advocate the reform of multilateral mechanism for political and economic cooperation. Since the creation of the United Nations Organization in 1945, its membership as well as its agenda have evolved significantly. From 51 members in 1945, it now has 193 members. And yet, the composition of the Security Council, the linchpin of the collective security mechanism, was modified only once, from 11 to 15 members in 1965. The need for reform of the Council of Security is all the more urgent and legitimate since new powers emerge and redesign the geostrategic map of the world. And Africa, a continent that counts more than a quarter of the UN member states are located, has only 3 non-permanent seats at the Council. We believe that this is unfair and it does not correspond to equity and international solidarity. The same applies to international economic and financial mechanism. As I indicated this morning when I addressed the General Assembly, we cannot validate the voice of the future with tools from the past. There is an urgent need to rethink the governance and the financing of the methods if we want to work with instruments and methods adapted to the new mutations. The world is changing, and so is Africa. One example: the conditions that are applied to African countries have been defined in what we call the Washington Consensus, which entailed putting us in a bunch of countries that were the least advanced, and then we were poor countries the most in debt. But who is not in debt? Some of the richest countries are more in debt. So we could have been called the richest country with the biggest amount of debt. But that meant that we could not borrow on the market because we could not go very quickly. So until we don't have the condition with public aid, we are not allowed to go on the public market. So how can we finance our development, our roads, our bridges, our highways, the energy, when public aid for development is completely falling down, disappearing? So staying as a state like that, our first ambition is to fight against poverty, and I believe that our ambition even goes beyond that. At its annual assemblies in June, the African Development Bank confirmed the outstanding performance of the African continent over the past years. Today, 4/5 of the African populations live in countries where there is peace and stability and an economic growth above the world average. And I will remind those of you that don't know what is happening in Africa now that it's easier to do Dakar, New York in 8 hours than it is to do Dakar, Djibouti. That takes 10 hours. And I can't even mention Dakar, the Cape. So that tells me that Africa is a vast continent with so many inhabitants in 54 states, and it is normal that it's acceptable that there are still some conflicts. For the first time, the average GDP per capita in Africa exceeds $1,000. And 7 out of 10 Africans are now connected to the world through a mobile phone. Only in sub-Saharan Africa, 3/4 of the 464 billion of public spending comes from domestic resources from within the country. In the Program for Infrastructure, the PIDA, Africa defined a coherent set of regional projects in the field of infrastructure, energy, information and communication technologies, and the development of cross-border basins. These projects require the mobilization of resources which can no longer be provided by the already plummeting official development aid. This is why there is a need to promote innovative financing mechanisms, such as concessions, joint ventures, and public-private partnerships. For this reason, we favor the reform of the global economic and financial governance to relax credit conditions and simplify the procedures for development project financing. Another example that I will give you is about our cooperation with the United States of America through the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Senegal, which was eligible in 2004, was not able to sign its compact only until 2009, 5 years of negotiation after the mission, going back and forth Washington-Dakar, to sign a compact for $642 million. From 2009 till today, the day we speak, we have spent $32 million out of those $642 million. This is just for study. This is to tell you, to let you know the impact of the heaviness when there is inefficiency. And until we change those, we will not be able to reach our goals of development. This is why the last point that I will bring up is the environment. It is a vital question, that the environment, and it creates the condition for human. For the last few years, scientists have been sounding the alarm. Our planet is in a bad condition. And we do not have anywhere else where to go. For now, we can't go to Mars or Jupiter. We have only this planet. And at the United Nations conference, we have renewed, and we still have non-viable resources that affect the world. 1/3 of the production of foods that are for human consumption is either lost or wasted. The overexploitation of resources, the gas carbonic emission, and the maritime pollution, and non-viable agricultural practices are continuing to belittle, impoverish the biodiversity, aggravate global warming, and jeopardize the fate of current and future generations. Based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, each country should contribute to sustainable development by preserving the resources of humanity. This motivated the decision I took when I assumed office to arrest the overexploitation of our fishery resources by revoking the industrial fishing licenses in order to institute a biological rest period for the species. Monsieur le Président,
that the students of Columbia University, as citizens of the world, will continue to live up with the wonderful vision shaped by this institution back to the time of King's College, a vision that enlarged the mind, improves the understanding, polished the whole man, and qualified them to support the brightest character in all the evaluated stations in life. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, President Sall. My name is Mamadou Diouf. I am a professor of history and African studies at MISAS, Middle East, South Asia, and African Studies, and the Department of History. I also direct the Institute of African Studies, which is the platform of all faculties and students working on Africa. And we are very pleased to be the co-sponsor of this event with the Earth Institute within the context of the World Leadership Program. So good afternoon, and I would like to thank you for coming. I would also like to thank President Sall for accommodating us in his very busy schedule, but for also accepting to stay in the US in a very difficult context. And he will be leaving tonight back to Dakar, going to work, which is the testimony, and I have to say that for two things. One, staying here shows that he is confident on his new government to address the challenges of Senegal. And it's important to say that, but also this is a testimony that he is not only a democratically elected president, but he is also committed to good governance. He is responsible for the conduct of business in Senegal, but he still can count on people to do the job. So I am moderating this aspect of the session, and what I would like to do is just to set the rules. I'm sure that you have many questions. You can ask them either in English, in French, but I also think that the President will accommodate questions in Halpular or Wolof.
Of course.
So you can do that for the Senegalese. But don't limit yourself to questions on Senegal. President Macky Sall is also the coordinator of NEPAD, the New Partnership for Africa's Development. So he has a continental and a regional role. So you can ask questions on those. So what we have is we have two mics, on the right and on the left. If you would like to ask a question, but just line up behind and I will call on you. So the floor is open. So please make sure that your questions are concise and clear, and we'll be able to accommodate, a big number of questions. So I will begin on my left. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Rihanna Diabo. I'm a senior at Columbia College, majoring in sustainable development. Merci pour votre discours, Monsieur Macky Sall. Ma question a trait au franc CFA en Afrique de l'Ouest. Vous avez parlé de la nécessité d'arrêter d'utiliser des outils.
You talked about needing to use older tools in order to create the solutions for tomorrow. What do you think then of the tools and the systems that were used during colonization? And from certain points of view, that will slow down the influence of le Senegal. Why can't we do more to evaluate the current situation to be sure that Senegal can profit from CFA?
Okay, thank you very much. Je voudrais remercier.
I would like to thank Rihanna.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. Question.
I think you've asked a very important question. We asked ourselves the same one, especially when we were students. because in our conception, our first conception, that the CFA is really colonial money and that we ought to go beyond this fact. I have to say that it's true that this common money, common to all of the old French colonies of Africa as well, even if the connotation is colonial, it still allows us to have an integration tool for our countries. It's not rare to see that the 8 West Africa countries come together thanks to a common currency, and it helps them to develop the same economic policies, the same legislation regarding customs and taxes, and these are points of convergence which allow our common economy to have a great deal in common. So it gives us the same goals economically. This colonial connotation finally was an ace in the hole for integration. It was a very positive point. And it's up to historians and sociologists and philosophers perhaps to help us to find some African concept of money and also to find a guarantee through our work and the stability of our economies to finally get to having a common money, a common currency. ECOWAS represents now a much greater force with 15 countries, including Nigeria, and which would like to evolve some kind of common currency for all of us. Also, Ghana is going to be part of us, and we hope to be able to connect all of West Africa in this manner. We need time for this. I think we are working very hard so that our currency won't be only guaranteed by the French Treasury. We don't want our currency always to be governed by European banks. That means that we don't act with our own currency. We have to learn to then have a collective African currency, which allows us to function independently. These are the difficulties, however, that we are encountering in African integration, and then problems of partnerships and agreements between the European Union and Africa. We need to find a more neutral currency, perhaps, but for the time being, this is a positive currency for our West African nations. Thank you so much for coming. We're so happy to have your visit. I'm in the program development of Professor Sachs. I'm a student. I would like to know, with respect to the controversies surrounding President Obama's visit, will that have any repercussions in Senegal? What are you doing in Senegal to guarantee the force of law to the Senegalese people on equal rights? You know, I just said something kind of important, I think, about the dignity of cultures and religions. On social situations, you cannot impose on Senegal something that doesn't suit it. And this ought not to affect the economic situation because it just becomes dictatorship, quite simply. Anyway, I would refuse to do that because I'm a free man. even if I come from a formerly colonized country, we have our vision of the world and of freedom and our vision of development. It's by dialogue, consultation, that we can find some equilibrium. But social questions have no, there's no monopoly on the responses to social problems. If you agree, fine. If you don't agree, you can find another social solution. Between my vision and that of Obama, well, we have different opinions. That doesn't prevent us from being brothers and friends. And it also has nothing to do with the nature of political or economic interest between Senegal and the United States. Of course, Senegal guarantees all human rights. Thank you.
Student at the college. And I'd like to ask regarding your early return, what do you think is behind the troubles in water service in Dakar, and what do you plan to do to fix it when you return?
Thank you very much. Oui, nous avons pour la première fois.
Thank you very much. Yes, for the first time, we have a situation of a technical breakdown in the food situation and the clean water situation. It's been for about 5 days. There are technicians from both sides, from all sides, who are responsible for distributing water don't manage to do so. We have problems with welding, with steel. Up to now, there have been weaknesses in the material. And I heard that they were just making the same pressure tests. Senegal is very vulnerable. Then another problem we have is it's not just people who are thirsty, but the economy is thirsty. We don't have funds. But we're looking for some alternative solutions to the problem so that we can diversify the systems of the distribution of safe water, clean water, and other systems. And we also want to build a certain number of water towers to be able to distribute water. It's really a shame, but we're trying. We need to define a strategy so that such an accident is never produced again, never occurs again.
It's truly an honor to hear you speak. My name is Jennifer Mahan. I'm a student in the engineering school. I'm studying civil engineering. And I was wondering, you mentioned a lot about the challenges to infrastructure and the environment that Senegal is facing. And I was wondering what's one initiative that your government is doing to encourage science and technology and engineering education among your students to ensure that the next generation can solve these challenges.
Thank you very much. C'est une question extrêmement.
That's an extremely important question, because today, Professor Flamand Beshir, who led the collectivizing of higher education, noted with everybody else that we have a problem of deficit in scientific and technical fields. A huge percentage of students are in literary fields, but how are we going to be able to fill necessary jobs in technology, engineering, etc.? And we also have far too many in literary fields. Literary fields are important, but we need to create at the base vocations for students when they're young. Math, physics, chemistry, geology, biology, etc. Our television ought to help us with that. All television shows us are dances from morning to night. I'm not against dancing, quite the contrary. But if there were some films about geography, etc., children might be tempted to pursue such a vocation. Documentaries on the environment or the consequences of greenhouse gases. If we raised awareness more, I think we could evolve and have more students who would be interested in following these fields of study, as well as more professors in those fields. Motivation is what we need. The more people are exposed to this subject matter, the more they will perhaps be able to major in these subjects. At least if we could have 50-50 percentage-wise. But right now we've got a huge deficit. As president, who came out of that same educational system, I have already ordered that all of the laboratories, that universities, that all of the laboratories be equipped with experimental, all of the experimental needs that they have. The request has been made, and within the context of a program, we have modernized the laboratories and equipped them in sciences, biology, etc., so that teachers and students can be in an environment of research to be up to the challenge of educating young scientists, all those disciplines that can help us. Furthermore, I think that one of the measures, good measures, maybe double majors is an important thing to do, maybe a science together with communication. It's kind of easy to convert the literary people into another subject. There is a lot to do. Certainly, the conclusions that I have of, collectivizing our thoughts and realizing our objectives in those domains.
Very sorry, but I cannot take more than 2 questions, and they will be the last one. I'm sorry. So I will take 1 question here and 1. Please, your question.
My name is Jacob Johnson, and I am a freshman in Columbia College. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for coming here to Columbia University today. My question pertains to foreign economic aid and development. How do the majority of Senegalese people perceive foreign economic aid, both in the colonial period and in the post-colonial period, particularly pertaining to the exportation of grain and other food from the United States to Africa, and also pertaining to debt programs? And finally, what do you perceive as the most effective forms of foreign economic aid that provide long-lasting support to Senegal and to Africa? Thank you.
Je remercie Jacob Johnson.
I thank Jacob Johnson. For a freshman, you have asked pretty intelligent questions. How do Senegalese people perceive humanitarian aid? I would say that Senegal has had a right to humanitarian aid in periods of time when we had drought, like 2011, 73 and 75. Senegal, however, did not experience famine like other countries, as other countries did. In 73, there was a huge drought, and the crop was reduced to nothing. There was an invasion also of crickets and other insects who decimated the crops that did manage to emerge. In my life, political man, there have been 2 droughts. But to complete our budget needs, see about $5 billion American dollars. Africa represents today maybe 300 billion, maybe about $6 billion. $600 billion. So this is this is congruent if things are in the right proportion. What can allow us to compensate for deficit? To the extent that our own decisions for development are respected, our own way, our own. I have seen a lot of alienation when we are not respected. In other words, even if we need aid, that's not an opportunity to do things that are against our own will. But public aid to development is a necessity. All countries have been helped at one point or another during their histories. All countries, even the United States. When the United States wanted to acquire its independence, countries like Morocco was the first country that recognized the United States of America. So these are cyclical stories. They come back all the time. I'm not a man ranked in the past. I'm not looking to venge myself on the what was done in the past. But Africa was a victim of 3 centuries of slavery, where the greatest resources of the continent were exported to America to make to favor the cotton and the sugarcane industries. After slavery was abolished, colonization was invented in order to civilize the peoples of Africa. This was a pretext to pillage the resources of the continent. I think today we owe Africa some kind of reparation, at least in accepting to contribute to our development. But development is the job we're going to have to do for ourselves. After the Second World War, through the Marshall Plan, look what the United States did in order to finance infrastructures destroyed by the war. Africa needs that kind of help today to create its own infrastructure. That's why we need to be we're not really asking for aid. We're asking for partnerships. Invest in us. Do some business. Create a railroad. That's what Africa is saying to the world today. And I think that that's what we're asking for. Less help than we are asking for partnership. Thank you.
Last question. Again, I'm sorry, but time is up. And I'm happy that it is a Senegalese student who is going to ask you.
Salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Merci beaucoup, Président Sall, pour votre temps. Digging out all of them, and then I pose this on my question en anglais. I'm a human rights master's student here at Columbia, and I wanted to know what your initiative or what your administration's initiative is for tackling youth unemployment in Senegal. It's been a huge discussion as part of the Millennium Development Goals and the post-2015 agenda all across Africa, and I'm wondering what Senegal specifically is doing to combat that and the influx of youth migration into Europe and the US. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, my microphone has some disturbance, but I think I understand your question. Vous dites qu'est-ce que le Sénégal fait pour atteindre peut-être les objectifs du millénaire, si je n'ai pas bien compris. L'emploi des jeunes. Okay.
What is Senegal doing to create jobs for young people? Madame or Mademoiselle? We are talking in Wolof now, so thank you very much. The question of unemployment is universal. This question is a priority for humanity, and what I mean by that is, how can we have an inclusive growth in the world and at the same time sufficient employment? In countries, in developing countries, the incidence of unemployment is much more visible and serious, and we think that in our case, in order to struggle effectively against youth unemployment, we have to prepare them to confront the work market. We also have to create conditions for the development of private investment, because the government all by itself doesn't really have the role of just creating jobs. Our job is health, law and order, security for the country, taxes, but it's the economy itself that creates employment. And to create jobs, you need investment. And for there to be investment, it's a vicious circle, as you see. You really need favorable businesses, environment where the rule of law is established. You need a democracy. You need struggle against impunity for those who do not obey the law. Everybody has to feel responsible and yet owed things at the same time. You need to give a good signal to the international community and to investors so that they will say, okay, this is a stable country. This country has democracy. In this country, justice is the rule, and so I can invest. Professional training is very important so that skilled labor is there and can respond to the employments. These are the dynamics that favor employment. If we don't do these, if we don't take these steps, fundamentally, we are not going to be able to improve the situation for young people. We need to develop sectors that create jobs. Agriculture is one of those fields. I'm not talking about little farmers. I'm talking about modern and mechanized farming that assures successful crops. And we are actually developing such farms now with young people with modern means in order to earn a lot more money than was possible with more primitive methods. Our young people won't need to take boats to go outside of the country. Our young people need to have lives that are not just guaranteeing their survival, but a good life. And that's what we work on every day.
I would like
Thank you very much.
So I would like to thank you all for your participation, for your great question, and for the rich answers of President Macky Sall. Before giving him an opportunity to offer some conclusion, I would like to say that you have seen in front of you the new generation of African head of states born after independence. And these head of states are facing the challenges of rebuilding states, shaping African responses to the ongoing process of globalization, and most of all, reinventing a future and reimagining new tradition for the African population and the largest group of the African population, the youth. His campaign was run under the banner of La Rupture, breaking away from past political practices in particular. As you have seen, he is resolute in his fight against corruption. He is also committed to consolidate democracy, popular participation, and development. His election marked a period of optimism, creativity, and expectation. He has given you a taste of his engagement, determination, and devotion to making Africa a free Africa. I would like to thank him on your behalf, on behalf of the World Leaders Forum and Columbia University, and I wish him well. President, you have the floor.
Thank you.